Alafia, I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the Art of Life H3O show. Usually I'm very happy to be in the studio doing the program, and I guess in a way I don't feel very sad, but in some ways I do feel melancholy because the title of this show is To Barbara with Love. And the Barbara to whom I refer is Dr. Barbara Sizemore, who recently made her transition and has left a void that certainly we know cannot be filled by another single person. I have with me in the studio her daughter, Dr. Kymara Chase.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. Good. And a very dear friend and colleague of hers, Dr. Hazel Stewart. And we have been sitting here, we've been talking about her, we've been sharing, and there will be no end to these kinds of conversations. But I want to let Barbara speak for herself, and so I have a roll-in that I hope that is prepared so that you can see the person that we will be talking about at this time.
Cunningham. I would not be where I am today if it were not for Ella Mae Cunningham. She taught me how to teach school. And, you know, I just got better and better at it because I was determined. I'm kind of like a competitive person. I always want to be the best, you know. So I got better and better. I can truly say that she taught me how to teach anybody how to read. I mean, anybody. I have taught people how to read who were lost in opportunity rooms, who were in, that's what we used to call them when the kids came up from Mississippi in the South and hadn't spent any time in school and couldn't read. I taught educationally mentally handicapped both in elementary school and in high school. I can literally say she taught me how to teach anybody how to read. And what we're doing now is so wrong for African American children. African American children have to have certain things in order to learn how to read. We speak what my good friend Safisha Madabuti calls the African American English vernacular. Some people call it Ebonics. That's what we speak. It is not the same as standard English. When you read and you have to comprehend, you have to read in standard English. At some time in the lives of our children, somebody has to teach them standard English grammar. They're not going to learn it through osmosis. They're not earthworms. You have to teach it to them. So vocabulary and English grammar are two givens if you want to have comprehension. And then you have to teach them how to derive meaning from these. But if you don't know what a sentence is, then you can't understand a paragraph. And if you don't understand the paragraph, you can't comprehend the story. And this is a real challenge for our children. The other is vocabulary. They have to learn the vocabulary. So first the word, normal, the word, then how the word is formed in sentences and paragraphs, and then comprehending through what we call the taxonomy, you know, the old taxonomy. That's what they need. They have to have this. And wherever you find teachers doing this, you find African American children learning how to read rather quickly. But unfortunately, the research that is done on reading is done with either integrated groups or white middle class children, because those are the children who live near the university. And university professors don't want to get too far away from the university. So their sample populations are always mixed. People bring me research all the time and they say, this is what you should be doing for African American kids. And I read it, and maybe there are 4 or 5 African Americans in the sample. I mean, what are you supposed to do with that? And they're in integrated situation. I want to see research that's done in a 100% African American school located in the low-income census zones, may be characterized by crime and violence, because that's where my problems are. And if you don't do research in that milieu, then I don't have any confidence in what you're doing, because that's where I have to find out, does it work? So I'm a little bit concerned about the No Child Left Behind legislation, which requires that whatever you do in order to get funds must be research-based, because there's so little research done in predominantly African-American schools located in low-income census zones characterized by crime and violence. So that worries me a little bit. But at any rate, this first chapter talks about my history with this. It takes me through my education. It takes me through the education of my children. My daughter graduated from Evanston Township High School in '66, her son in '88, her daughter in '90. The same old problems we had when I graduated in '44 are still there, walking in a circle, walking in a circle. The same things I fought, she fought. I mean, it's uncanny how little progress that we have made in solving the problems of educating African American children. We just will not speak to their needs. We just will not. And so they rebel. They rebel. They understand fully what's going on in the school. They're not fools and they're not crazy. And therefore, when they see these inequities, when they see this imbalance, when they see that what they're being given doesn't help them, then they go on and form their own little norms and their own little peer groups and their own means of rejuvenating their spirits and keeping themselves alive. Because we will not respond to their needs. And I see this over and over and over. I talk to my nephews, I talk to my stepchildren. I have 4 stepchildren. And I'm pleased with my children. My children have all exceeded my expectations. My 2 biological children both have their terminal degrees. They're both doctorates. My 4 stepchildren have all graduated from college. My 2 grandchildren who are old enough have already graduated from college. So my children have exceeded my expectations. None of them, and grandchildren, haven't. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what happened to them, in school, even though they were successful. Look, if my children and stepchildren and grandchildren could do the work, could read, could make good grades, and still got whipped, then what's happening to their other children? If my children, with an educated mother, PhD, with experience in teaching, if my children can be in trouble in school learning, and there weren't discipline problems, but, learning, then what about all these other children? I had to practically be at school all the time to get my children what they needed. And my daughter, the same thing with her children. Why is that? Why is that necessary? Now, my premise is this. My premise is that the real problem is white supremacy. It's like 2 sides of this coin. One side is white supremacy. The other side is the imputation of black inferiority. See, if you don't have somebody who's inferior, then you know, what's the good?
You're not going to be superior to anything.
So white supremacy, black inferiority, they go together. The 2 sides of the same coin, which is called racism, right? And this is what is the problem. Now, Thurgood Marshall tried to get to this. But how was he going to attack white supremacy when there's 9 white justices on the Supreme Court? And he wanted to win his case. So he didn't attack white supremacy or white superiority. He attacked segregation. Segregation is only a symptom. Why would you segregate somebody if you didn't think they were inferior or nasty or dirty or something's wrong with them? Why would you do that? So when Plessy versus Ferguson became the law of the land in 1896, and Brown wrote this decision that said, if there is a feeling of inferiority attached to separate but equal, it is in the eye of the Negro. He was lying, no question about it. Because the Negro didn't feel he was inferior. It was the white man who thought he was inferior. And he just turned it around and wrote a lie in there, and Plessy became the law of the land. Understanding this, Thurgood Marshall then knew, hey, if a Supreme Court justice would tell a big lie like that, he didn't have a fat chance in hell. of solving this problem through the attacking white supremacy. So Thurgood Marshall did the best he could. People are complaining about it now, you know, and say, but hindsight is always 20/20. And sure enough, when the decision came out in 1954, I remember writing a piece on it and saying, I will never say that anything that's all black is all bad, because my family's all black and it's good. My church is all black and it's good. I said my school I went to in my early years of my life was all black and it was good. I said, so I'm not going to buy into that, which is really what the decision said. When the decision said that the separation of the Negro makes them feel inferior, that meant that if you separating something all black, you got to feel bad about it. I didn't never feel bad about it. And then when I went to the 72 conference in 1972, and I heard these people from these black colleges stand up and say these things, I'm saying, you're talking the black college right out of existence, because if it's all black, it's all bad. I never could bring myself to that, which took me to Forestville High School, where I was principal. At that time, you know, the integration movement was all in big swing, and Martin Luther King had moved to Chicago. And
Well, of course, you know that I could hardly bear to interrupt Barbara, not even on this tape. And I certainly couldn't bear to do it when she was sitting here in the studio, because wasn't she on target?
Yes.
Yes. Wasn't she always on target?
Yes.
Didn't she always cut to the chase and
Yes.
see? Kymara, talk about your mother.
Well, my mother, I think, was always in trouble, I would call it trouble, because I remember my mother studied all the time. She never wanted you to go in her room and bother her books or her things, because she was a speed reader, so she could read a book in a couple of hours. She could finish an entire book, so she read a lot. She had a lot of information. But when I was young, Bobby Wright, who was, Bobby Wright.
For whom the Garfield Mill Health Center is named.
Bobby Wright and my mother were really the champion activists, I called them. They would be around, they would have it back then. In those days, you had a ditto machine. They would be in the trunk of the car running leaflets and flyers off and passing them out to people everywhere. And she she would come in the house late at night, and by the time they came in the house, I would be at home with my brother by myself some of the time, and I would get all these phone calls from people. And of course they would be threatening or racial type phone calls and things like that. So I'd ask my mother when she came in, I said, "What did you do today? You know, what were you doing?" You know, that kind of thing. And of course then, I think maybe I was in grammar school, so I was really not quite old enough to understand exactly what they were really up to. But it seemed like as long as I could remember, she she had a cause, and she lived her life to see that the African American child who are descendants of African who were brought here, not of their own free will, were educated in this country. And that was her banner.
And that was her passion.
That was her passion.
And Dr. Stewart, you were one of her colleagues.
Well, I consider myself to be one of her mentees.
All right.
Because Barbara taught me much of what I needed to know in order to be successful as an educator. I had many other pieces, but there were pieces that were missing. And I found that when I met Barbara and listened to her and followed her directions, then I could be successful in helping African American children as well as Latino children or poor children to be successful in achievement. And so, you know, I just thought that this was wonderful, because I just couldn't do it without the information that she provided and the roadmap that she laid out for me to help these children be successful.
Well, you know, I have to share this with you, and I want to come back to that because I want you to reiterate that story of how she came to your school after much persuasion. I just want to say that when the students at Harrison High School walked out of their classes and boycotted them, demanding quality education, and got themselves arrested, Breadbasket, now Push, had a big rally, and Barbara was the keynote speaker. And she fired up that audience, and I was in that audience. There were a number of teachers in that audience because we were all very concerned about our students having been arrested because we knew the truth. We knew that we were not able to deliver quality education to our children, and we really weren't quite sure why. But at any rate, when I saw her, I said, wherever she is, that's where I'm going. And I found out that she was teaching at Northeastern Illinois University at the Center for Inner City Studies. I went straight away to Northeastern, signed up for her class, which was called Methods of Teaching Inner City Children. And I walked in the class and I sat down, and I came as a teacher myself to learn from another teacher how to teach black children, because I was certain that if the children weren't getting quality education, that I was supposed to have something to do with that, you know, thinking I was already doing that, but certainly not being able to deliver on that belief. When I sat down, the first words out of Barbara's mouth was, there's no such thing as methods of teaching inner city children. And the first thing she did was to destroy the myth that black children were in some way different from other children, and so you had to stand on your head or, you know, design something because they were so hard to teach. And then she just rolled off all that research. You know, she, as you said, she read everything, and she just rolled off Sadowski and Lesser and all the research. She could process more information than a computer can today. So she talked about stigmatizing children, about having, you know, the belief yourself that the children can't learn and that there's something extraordinary that you're supposed to do. What you're supposed to do is decide if they can learn and teach them and treat them as though they can learn and be logical and rational about the approach. And so she explained it here in that tape, when she said, in the first place, you have to recognize that children have a language. And you have to address that. And you have to teach them the language in which the school communicates so that they can read that language, because it's entirely possible to do this, you know, which was just revolutionary. Because who believed that black children could learn if you simply sought to teach them? So tell us about how you got Barbara to come to your situation.
Okay, when Barbara came to Chicago, she decided she was going to work with a small number of schools. And these were schools that were in a special program. My school, Tilden High School, was not in that program. However, her then son-in-law was recently hired at my school through a new program. And he asked her if she would consider coming. She really didn't want to come because the school had such a horrible reputation. And the fact that a kid had been killed in my building the year that I was asking her to come. But finally, she agreed that she would come to Tilden. The staff was ready. We were just totally at a loss of what it is we needed to do to move the children forward. We were willing to be trained. We were willing to implement whatever it is we needed to do. And so she consented to come to work with us. And I would say that our school was one of her biggest success stories, because we listened, we followed her direction, we did what it is she told us that we needed to do. And although back then I believe schools were really not doing well as having children achieve, we doubled our scores in 1 year, which wasn't really much, but however, it was that almost none of the children were doing well. Another thing that happened, by the way, is that, we were getting kids who were Chinese and they could not speak English, as well as Hispanics who didn't speak English. And we had actually volunteers helping us to teach these kids to understand English. One of these young men, Frank Yang, got a perfect score on the SAT, which was unheard of. Our children's scores started to soar as far as their composite scores on the ACT. And that was because of us implementing some of the things that Barbara told us that we needed to do to help these children who no one believed in. These children were being turned down by the magnet schools because they couldn't speak English. And we took them, we took kids from the neighborhood, we took the African American and Hispanic children, and we just worked wonders because of Barbara's direction and the staff's willingness to follow what it is she said we needed to do in order to be successful with these children.
And as much as I tried to find out what made Barbara Barbara, I listened to her when I interviewed her here, and she talked about the schools that she went to. She talked about her family. She talked about her book, the chapters of her book. She knew what to do, and she knew how to do. First of all, she knew how to do what it was that she knew to do, which many people have ideas about. Somebody needs to do something. But quite a number of people don't have any idea about what it is that needs to be done. They just know something needs to change. And Barbara said herself that when she came out of Northwestern, she didn't have a clue. And that happens to us. We go to these teacher training institutions and we come out of them, we don't have a clue as to what it is we need to do, because the clues that they have given us do not apply to the real world. And I think that was a strong suit for Barbara. I don't think she was afraid to say, what are they talking about? This doesn't work. I tried that. This isn't working here. And then she sought answers. And as you said, she read a lot. And she did a lot. And she got in trouble a lot. And she got you in trouble some, didn't she, Kymara?
Yes, she did.
Okay.
Well, my mother was the only child, and she grew up in Terre Haute, Indiana, with her grandmother and my grandmother's sisters and brothers. And all of my grandmother and my grandfather, they all went to Indiana State Teachers College.
Mm-hmm.
All of them in the 1920s. And so she was really surrounded by teachers, and they used her because she was a young child in the family as the guinea pig.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Barbara was she was very brilliant. She was just very, very brilliant person. And so they would take her to school to prove to their teachers that black children could learn,
mm-hmm.
or the Negro at that time,
mm-hmm.
that we were called. And I think that was all a part of her passion and her interest, and became her life's work.
Mm-hmm.
But when she went to Northwestern, my mother was a language major there, and modern languages was her scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually wanted to work at the United Nations. My mother spoke 7 languages when she was young, fluently.
I didn't realize that.
Fluently, she
mm-hmm.
spoke 7 languages. And she wanted to be an interpreter.
Mm-hmm.
But because of Jim Crow, when she came out, there were no jobs literally for African black people, Negro,
mm-hmm.
to apply to.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, my mother kept the one ads,
mm-hmm.
just so we would remember, because young people today, they don't know this history.
Mm-hmm.
And
blacks need not apply. Negroes
blacks
need not apply.
Mm-hmm. And even though she had a master's degree from Northwestern, when she went to Shoup Elementary School, where she taught Emil Jones, as a matter of fact, she was not a certified teacher. You at that time, you could not be certified unless you went to State Teachers College in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So she was not a certified teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And she had really a real trying experience there.
Mm-hmm.
Because there, the principal turned her into the FBI as a communist. And my mother was investigated by the FBI for most of my life as a communist.
That is so ridiculous.
That's correct. And the reason why she turned her in as a communist, because the principal at the time wanted her to march her classroom around the school because she felt that the black children weren't patriotic enough. So they needed to march around the school to the Pledge of Allegiance of the flag or whatever. And my mother felt that she needed to teach them how to read because at that time she had an EMH class, and she wanted to very much teach them how to read. And so she refused to march them around the class. So the principal turned her into the FBI, and that's the story that my mother tells to this day. But while she was at the particular school, LMA Cunningham, and I'm not sure what school that was, but she credits LMA Cunningham as teaching her how to teach children how to read. And consequently, I had a learning disability at a younger age, and I literally did not learn how to read or pass a reading exam until I was in 8th grade. And my mother took me to everybody in the city of Chicago to help to ascertain my learning problem, because then they didn't know anything in the 50s, nothing about what a learning disability like they do today. So she literally taught me to read, and believe you me, I did not enjoy it at all. But in turn, I taught my children to read. So this is something that I know how to do. And so I think after that, then my mother, after she learned how to teach children and was successful, and of course at that time in teaching, all the people who were in education at that time were just brilliant people, because there were no job opportunities for them to go. And, you know, other than you worked at the post office, you worked for the CTA, you worked for the, Board of Education. That's pretty much what black community, middle class black community, or you worked in the factories. That was the job. And we lived in Lilydale, 91st and Perry. And I literally grew up in a just wonderful community. The community was a community then. Everybody was your parent, and you were punished by everybody in the community, and you just, and it was very respectful type of life then. Of course, that was in the 50s, the way we grew up.
I'm trying to make you be in the 50s, honey. Okay.
So that's, that was, and at that time, my mother was teaching at Gillespie, and I attended Gillespie. Then when she moved to Drew, I attended Drew as well. Then we moved to Chatham, and Chatham, I finally had the opportunity to attend the school that my mother was not a teacher. So I was really happy about that.
Why were you not happy to attend the schools where she was on the faculty?
Well, when my mother was at Gillespie and I started kindergarten or 1st and 2nd grade, she taught 8th grade. Okay, and if she, I would be knocked in the eye, pulled, beat up, or something terrible would happen to me on the way home, because the students would say, "Barbara Sizemore, your mother?" I say, "Yes," and then boom, right in the eye. She gave me an F.
Oh my goodness.
That kind of thing.
All right.
So it was not a pleasant experience, that kind of thing. And then of course, and having your mother as the teacher in the school is sometimes, takes a toll out on you. I'm just very happy that I didn't have her as a teacher in school, because I had her as a teacher at home. That kind of thing. But I had a wonderful, wonderful childhood, and it was just absolutely a fairy tale community to grow up in, at that particular time. And most of the students, and I wasn't alone, because a lot of the students in classes with me, their parents were also teachers in school. So that's just how it was at that time. And then when my mother became a principal at Anton Dvorak Elementary School on 16th Street in Central Park, that was her first principalship. I was in high school at that time. And Clara Houghton was her assistant principal. And at that time, they were into the open space, teaching without walls. non-graded. You could have male classes or
Continuous
female classes.
progress type.
Continuous progress. All of these things were going on, and they had a very, very successful school. And that school, to this day, has never been on probation. I think their scores in the 30 percentile. I believe the last time I think it's always it maintained the high achievement that they established in the school, and she's very proud of that particular school. And then she went on to Forestville High School, where she worked with Anderson Thompson. And when she was at Forestville High School, I think I was on my way to college at that time. And after Forestville, she became the superintendent of the Woodlawn organization, where Leon Finney was the community organizer in that particular school. And she worked with Hyde Park High School. Oh, I can't remember the lady's name. That was the principal of the school when she was superintendent there.
Anna Coheim.
Anna Coheim, thank you. And at that time, the big thing the mother was working on, she did a lot of things at Forestville, like she did the cultural piece at Forestville, and that's how she really handled the school with the gangs, by putting the African American culture into school and teaching these children their culture. Because I remember she had the Magnificent 10 at Forestville, and each one of those young men who were part of the Magnificent 10 read
a speech by one of the famous black people of our past.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I've seen them perform.
Yes, and she really got a control of that school by putting our culture into the particular school. And then when she became the superintendent of the Woodlawn Project, she started PACS, which was a Parent, Administrators, Community, Teachers, and Students Organization, which now they translate that to the LSCs have now, but they had that then at that time. So my mother, she implemented a lot of things way before.
She was way before her time.
Way before her time.
Yeah.
Way before her time.
Yeah.
And then after she lost that job, she became disenchanted with the Board of Education. So she pursued other career path, and she became the superintendent of schools in Washington, D.C. And of course, my mother, being young and idealistic at the time, believed that the job of the superintendent was actually to teach the students. You know, she didn't realize that it was a political position, and that that's not really what they wanted her to do. So when she found out certain things that happened in D.C. That became politically destructive to her, I wanted her, of course, to take the money when it happened. But she told me, I've never been incompetent in my life, so I'm getting a lawyer and I'm going to fight this. And meanwhile, she had exchanged professorship to the University of Ghana. So I got a chance to go to the University of Ghana in her position, so I was kind of happy about that.
Oh, very good.
While she lost her fight with the D.C. Board of Education, which was unfortunate for her. And then after that, she was blackballed. So she was unemployed for quite a while. But during the time while she was not employed, she became the great speaker and lecturer, and her consultant business really took off. And the people who really loved her and what she stood for and what she did really helped her survive during that time until she got a position in the Black Studies Department at the University of Pittsburgh, where she stayed for 18 years. And at Pittsburgh, she studied, she wanted to continue Ron Edmonds' work on effective schools. So she studied schools that were high-achieving African-American schools in urban areas with, as she described, in low census, economic census zones and high-crime areas. And she found several schools around the nation that were high-achieving. And she started networking with those principals, and really she wrote, what exactly do they do to maintain this achievement, which came out to be what we have now called the Structured 10 Routines. So in 1992, when she came to Chicago, because my grandmother was ill and in a nursing home, and my mother wanted to be close to her mother. She took a job at DePaul University, and of course I was shocked because I have a degree. I have 3 degrees. One of them is from DePaul University, and I told my mother, I said, "Do they know who you are? You know, do they know? Do they know about you?" No. And she said, "Well," she said, "I have judges." I really couldn't believe it because there were really no black professors at DePaul. There were not any black people at DePaul at all. I mean, not even a painter, a janitor, a police officer, nobody. So I said, "I just can't believe that you're going to work at DePaul University." But she did, and when she got there, she was the first dean of the School of Education. She set it up. That was the first time they had a School of Education. And at the same time, she started this program that she wanted. Paul Vallis then, and everything was changing in Chicago from the 1988 reform movement to Paul Vallis's regime in Chicago. And she wanted to help these scores to come up because at that time, Mother was walking around with the scores in her pocketbook. I don't know how she got them or who she got them from. But these scores were in single-digit numbers. You know, like 9% of the students in the schools were at national norms. And that's the truth. They were in single-digit numbers. And she wanted to do something about it. So she first went out soliciting everyone in the community, trying to get someone interested in why aren't you out marching in the streets and protesting and storming about these terrible scores these children are not learning. We're totally turning out generations of illiterate youngsters. And, of course, she couldn't get any interest. And she went through all the people that she knew from before to try to drum up the interest. But finally, Fredonia Johnson had a program in the Chicago Public Schools called Canal. And Fredonia let Mother speak at Canal Project. And at this Canal Project, she talked to a group of principals who were part of that project. And they volunteered to let us work in their schools with this 10 routine project. And that's what Dr. Stewart was referring to. And we started out with 8 schools. And when we started out, a mother asked me to join her. So she was not only my mother, my friend, but she was also my boss. And we worked in these 8 schools we worked in the Chicago Public Schools for 10 years with our program. And I'm happy to say now that most of those routines, there are 10 routines, and most of those routines are institutionalized to this day by the Chicago Board of Education. They don't give credit to Dr. Sizemore for those routines, but they are in all of their information, all of their paper. Our routines are there. Some of them, even our forms, are what they're using.
Dr. Stewart, tell me something about yourself. What in your career you have been the following?
Okay, in my career, I started out as a clerk. I went to school at night. Yes.
A school clerk?
No, for Cook County Department of Public Aid.
Okay.
And I went to night school and graduated from a junior college, received a scholarship to the University of Illinois, where I got my bachelor's in chemistry and biology. And I began teaching at Harlan High School.
Okay, I had a daughter to go to Harlan.
Yes. And after leaving Harlan, I was transferred for integration to Kennedy High School.
Where's Kennedy High School?
On the southwest side of Chicago.
Where there are no black people.
There's some black people who come from LeClaire Court to the school, which is quite a distance from the school. But I taught there for a while, and from there I went to Krieger as assistant principal.
Okay.
And after Krieger, I went to the district office as the math science coordinator for 6 months.
Okay.
And from there, I went to Tilden High School as a principal, the first African American or female principal of Tilden High School.
Okay.
And from there, I became the region officer over 87 schools on the west side of Chicago.
Okay.
Where I instituted Barbara Sizemore's program in about 28 schools. And these principals volunteered to let us work on these 10 routines, structured 10 routines, to move their schools ahead. Okay. And we had phenomenal success in those 28 schools. We consistently, year after year, exceeded the board's improvement in reading and math, because indeed we were on the right track, and these schools just soared in their achievement, working with us on a shoestring budget because we were not funded, and the principals would kick in maybe $2,000 each, and we retrained their staff and implemented the other routines, which were very successful, and those schools continue to do extremely well.
Can that still be done? Can her routines be used in some of these schools that are on a watch list and all of that?
Yes, they can.
Okay. What does it take to get them to get the board to know that they have the keys, they have the solutions, and all they need to do is get the people who know what the solutions are to activate them and put them in place?
Well, I think they're going in a different direction at this point in time. They have new leadership, and the leadership, usually, most of it coming from universities, they have their own roadmap and strategies for improving achievement. And I'm not sure what those are, but we do know how to make a difference in the schools, but we haven't been asked.
That's unfortunate, because we need to make a difference in the schools.
Yes.
And when I looked back at that tape again and saw that Barbara had zeroed in on No Child Left Behind, there was a whole conference at the Center for Inner City Studies in which everybody, all kind of politicians, all kind of educators, all kind of people came, and they all had, you know, their say about what they thought of this proposal or this policy. And they had, needless to say, they had a very dim view. But Barbara hit the nail on the head. You know, she said, this is supposed to be based on research. Where is it? There isn't any research. You don't have relevant research on which to base any of the actions that you will take. And that was one of the beautiful things about her, is that she didn't just come off the top of her head. She always founded what she was recommending in something solid, like, this is what the record shows. This is the information about this population, and therefore we can, you know, can project that if you manipulate this A or B, that you will have, you know, the following result.
But my mother was not a capitalist in a capitalistic country. See, my mother could have made a lot of money doing selling or packaging of what she wanted to do. But she didn't, she wanted results. And she gave it freely. Education is a business, okay? It's much like cancer. If you solve it, you don't make money. As long as it's not solved, you make a lot of money. And we call educanists. You know, there are people who are in the universities, if people do research, are there to do research for a reason. And if you follow the money, you can find out, you know, what is that about. And then when they run out of money, then they come up with something new. I've taught at the Chicago Public Schools for, this will be 32 years now.
Really?
Yes. And when my mother named her book Walking in Circles, I'm a complete circle now at the Board of Education. I started the Board of Education in 1972, individualized education at Michelle Clark, which was the small school concept in 1972. And now, today, in 2004, we are implementing the small school concept. So, and we just, it wasn't called that in 72, but the concept, the theory was the same as it was in 72. They implemented it at Evanston Township in 78, threw it out, and we're doing it again in 2004. So education is a business. And if you read the effective school research that Ron Edmonds did in the 60s, you would know, I think it was early 70s, late 60s, you will know that we know everything that we need to know to educate these children if we choose to do so. But if you do what you need, you know, you cannot make money, and people are out to make money. So that's why we're not educating these youngsters.
And so we have, as you say, it's more like walking in a maze.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because you never really know where you are.
Right, exactly. And the young people coming out, and not only that, but the way we train teachers in universities really needs to change. Because when you go, there's a big divide between the practitioner and the professor at the university. It's such a big divide that they see themselves as, I would say, superior to the practitioner. In fact, they treat the practitioner as if you don't know anything, that they have all the answers with their theories, and that you that actually are doing the work, the practice, have no idea. Now, if you were in medicine, this would be absurd. You would not want a doctor who's just working on theory to work on you. You would want a practitioner. But in education, it's the other way around. So now, and just to let you know, the University of Chicago, the University of Illinois runs the Board of Education now. So we're working on all these research theories. Not what we practice, but what we theorize will be what we should do. And just to give you an example, a person works in a university, goes to school, gets their PhD or EDD, and they go and teach. Now, they haven't any experience teaching, but they're teaching a person like me how to teach.
Which is ridiculous.
Isn't that kind of...
I think that's the reason why, as a part of the curriculum committee under Barbara at DePaul, we recommended that the professors go back and teach for a day or two in a school so they can see if the theories that they're putting forth indeed work. Let them do the teaching, and let's see if they are successful as they think that we will be under their tutelage. And that would be very interesting to see.
Well, I tell you, when the first teacher strike, and actually the only teacher strike that I recognize, because in most cases teacher strikes are not real, that it's a misnomer, because you have about 12 or 13 unions who have representatives sitting around that table, and the schools are not going to reopen until they are all satisfied with whatever their issues are. So they call it a teacher strike as though the teachers are the ones who are keeping the schools from operating because they want a pay raise or they want a medical program or something like that. But it actually, there are a whole bunch of other people who are sitting at the table, people who work for the board, who are the people the custodial staff and the firemen and all these other people who are in fact a major part of this thing. But the teacher strike that I recognize is the strike at which the so-called FTBs, the full-time basis teachers, finally got the courage to walk out of their classrooms and picket the schools because they were required to do everything that the regular teachers were required to do, but yet they did not have any of the benefits that the regular teachers had.
Right.
And it was because they had not been certified. They had not passed this examination, and anybody will tell you that the examination was racist from start to finish. There was a certain kind of teacher that they were looking for. I can remember that there were two sisters who were not certified, not because they didn't pass the exam, but
the oral. They didn't pass the oral.
Oh no, it wasn't. This wasn't about the oral. They said that they were too ugly. They would frighten the children.
Oh,
let me tell you that you will never.
Well, they got that in from the interview.
They saw them when they went to.
That's the oral.
That's the oral.
Right.
That was the oral. They failed a lot of people on the oral.
Right.
But it's very interesting that you bring that up, because now the new administration has instituted that policy again. That not for teachers, but for administrators. Now, every administrator must, now we're back to taking the state test, the state exam, and the Chicago public school exam, and there will be an oral exam, which is there just for that kind of subjective elimination.
Well,
So
I
we're
didn't
back to
object.
that.
I didn't object to there being an examination. What I objected to was that the examination was biased. It was culturally biased. It was racially biased, and there was no question about it, and it could easily have been demonstrated. But the thing is that the FTBs went out on strike, and I was a certified teacher, but I went out on strike with them because I said, if these teachers are in fact inferior teachers, then we need to know this, because they are in the schools where the majority of black children are. And if they are not, they need to be paid. They need to be fully compensated in the same way other teachers. Because you could walk down a hall. I was not principal in the Chicago public school. I was a private school principal. But you could walk down a hall, and you could walk in and out of classrooms, and you couldn't tell an FTB from a certified teacher.
No, you can't.
So there should have been a difference. You should have been able to see the difference between somebody who had passed the test and somebody who had not. Somebody who has passed the driver's test presumably can drive down the street. Somebody who has not may not be able to do that. But in the case of a teacher who is standing before a classroom, and you're in that classroom observing that teacher, and you haven't got a clue that this teacher has not passed this test, and they kept those teachers in those positions for years, and they gave them excellent ratings. You know, they didn't come and say you're only doing satisfactory work. They gave them excellent ratings, but they never could get out of that limbo of being FTBs, which was a stigmatized thing, because the certified teachers had, you know, a little class system going. Certified teachers kind of thought, well, you know, she's an FTB.
Well, you know, back now with No Child Left Behind, though, part of a well-qualified teacher is to have that state certification, which you do have to pass that exam. Now, we all know that exams are gateways into positions and jobs. It's not, are you a good teacher or not? It is the gateway, it's the passage. So you have to take the exam.
We're not saying that you shouldn't have an exam. We're saying who monitors the people who are preparing this exam? Who looks at this exam and says that this exam is an exam that will examine what it purports to examine? And especially when you have a subjective oral examination, and I was probably trained by one of the best teacher trainers in the system, Lillian Dimitrov. And Lillian Dimitrov told us all the stuff to do. You know, we had to have a little hat. They had a little hat, they had little white gloves on, you know, you had your stockings, and at that time they had seams, and they had to be straight up your legs, you know, and you had to sit like this, and of course they tape recorded your responses, so you better not come out with any ebonics, you see. So the thing was that you had, who were these people? How were they chosen to evaluate teachers? You know, the whole thing was a mess.
Well, it's political.
But I'm just saying that, you know, we've had a lot of, as you said, school is a business. It is also a political situation. And your mother worked in that situation and was able to rally educators. She was an educator's educator. We looked up to her. She could tell us, she could say, Barbara could, would you say Paul Vallis thought she could walk on water?
I said that.
You said that,
right.
you know. Well, no doubt she did walk on water, because she worked in an environment which was really anti the kinds of changes that she was regularly making. And she motivated teachers who felt burnout or maybe felt like up against the wall, they didn't know what to do. And she made them believe that there was something they could do. And Hazel Stewart said, and we did it. We did it. Our children soared. You know, this is why we've come here tonight to talk about Barbara Sizemore, because we need a committee of people who would seek to try to fill at least a part of that void. We can't let that go. You know, somebody has got to care about our children who are in these schools. Somebody has got to say, this will work, we've tried it, here are some records to show that it works. There have got to be some principals that are not afraid to be unemployed. I don't know how Barbara made it when she was not employed, but I don't think she was on a corner with a cup.
Well, I think Barbara left us with a legacy. She told us, each of us,
Okay.
what it is she wanted us to do.
Okay.
And those of us who were, I guess I would call them her inner circle, we know what it is her expectations for us was. And one of those things is she wanted us to put this in writing. Each of us, she told us what it is we had done that was, you know, really important, and that it was important that we get this in writing so that we could share what it is we had done to help others who are attempting to help children of color.
When is the book coming?
I'm not sure, but I
But I
hope
know
it'll
she
be by
finished it.
January. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm thinking, but I haven't. I don't know. But we started a scholarship fund in her name.
Okay.
So that's what I'm working on.
All right.
now, yeah.
And whose address is that? What is the address?
It's 843 Dodge Avenue in Evanston. The STR. It's on the STR website.
Okay.
www.structured10routines. Yeah.
www.structure10routines, and that's where people go. That's the website they go to
Right, for
to
the
find out
address.
about the scholarship
Yes.
campaign
Yes.
in her name.
Yes.
What a wonderful memorial to her.
Yes, that's what we're going to do.
Well, Anderson Thompson says he wants to start a dialogue. He wants to have some kind of reunion. He has these great plans, so you'll probably hear from him very soon. And I don't think that we can do enough to honor her memory.
Yeah.
I don't either.
Because she has done so much for us that it's just hard to say. I have 1 minute. Somebody want to say something?
I think that she made a great contribution to education, and I know that the University of Pittsburgh will be giving her a memorial, and I know that at NAPSE, the National Black School Educators Conference this year, will be dedicated to her in her honor.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Dr.
thank you.
Kymara Chase,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Hazel Stewart. Thank you, Barbara Sizemore, for all that you are still doing for us. Hotep.
It's white supremacy. It's like two sides of this coin. One side is white supremacy, the other side is the imputation of black inferiority. See, if you don't have somebody who's inferior, then you know what's the good.
You're not going to be superior to anything.
So white supremacy, black inferiority, they go together. The two sides of the same coin, which is called racism, right? And this is what is the problem. Now, Thurgood Marshall tried to get to this, but how was he going to attack white supremacy when there's 9 white justices on the Supreme Court? And he wanted to win his case. So he didn't attack white supremacy or white superiority. He attacked segregation. Segregation is only a symptom. Why would you segregate somebody if you didn't think they were inferior or nasty or dirty